Well, happy lunchtime, everyone. Um, I am Lindsey Speed. I am the executive director here at Traffic 911. Joining me is Courtney Oliphant and Paula Son. We were going to have another advocate, but they are hard at work today dealing with crises. So it will be the three of us. And yeah, I would love for maybe Courtney, if you go first and introduce yourself, what you do here, how long you've been here, maybe a little bit of why.
Okay. Courtney Oliphant, Program Supervisor. I've been with Traffic 911 for going on 4 years. They hired me on April Fools because I like to say they think I'm a joke. But I was an advocate before that for a little over a year and a half, and then transitioned into that. A little bit about my why. So I used to struggle. So I always say my why, my testimony kind of goes hand in hand, because I used to struggle just with what the Lord was doing with this. But I grew up in a very loving home where love, protection, provision, affirmations, all the things were just like readily available to me. I like to say I'm a direct product of what it looks and feels like to be poured into, both in my immediate family and my extended community. And so the reason why I used to struggle with that is because the Lord used to really pull me towards some harder things and harder people who were struggling with things, more specifically with sexual abuse. But it wasn't until when I was in college I got to mentor a young lady who was in high school. She was trafficked, and that was kind of my preview into the trafficking space. Took that kind of fueled my passion, and just got curious about kind of why girls were viewed a certain type of way without inherent dignity and worth. And I kind of spearheaded some stuff, went on and got my master's in social work, and worked in the foster care space for a little bit, and kind of saw the intersectionality between foster care and sex trafficking. And then the Lord brought me here, and I now have come to realize that the Lord is using my story to kind of show that there's another side of things. I know what hope looks like, and I get to give that back to our girls and our boys, and now through the advocates as their supervisor too. So that's a little bit about my why.
And you were an advocate, and then recently you become, your caseload is a caseload of advocates.
It is.
Love it. Love it. Okay, Paula, introduce yourself.
I am Paula Son. I am a Family and Community Liaison for Traffic 911. I work specifically with the caregivers of kids who have been rescued, recovered from trafficking. I would say my why started maybe about 10 years ago when I was working with adult workers in the sex industry. And it was then that I realized that regardless of the type of work you do, regardless of where you are in society, if you're on the upper echelon or if you're way down below, people have the same problems. It does not matter what kind of work you do. And so when I realized that, my heart was pulled towards this industry, but also previous to that, I would say about 14 years ago, is when I started working specifically with parents of kids who were, let's say, in the juvenile justice system, and they were trying to get the parents to implement some things so the kid would not go to detention. And it was then that I understood the dynamic of the family. I understood the dynamic of what goes on in homes. I understood how people operate is considered their normal. So what looks like normal to me may not be normal to them, but I had to adjust to how they operate to bring some structure and togetherness in it. So with my role in Traffic 911, I get to walk alongside the caregivers as they are acclimating and getting used to what life looks like when their child is recovered. I get to host parent support groups virtually, which is totally fun. The parents caregivers have formed their own community of support for each other. And it's so important because so many times they felt like people didn't understand them, or they felt judged when they would share their story about what their kiddo is going through or what their kiddo is doing. They felt judged a lot. So this support group allows them to join together, to support each other, to laugh, to cry, to share their stories, to pull on each other for resources, so many different things. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve the caregivers.
I love that. And why do we say caregivers and not parents? Will you explain?
Yes, caregivers could be any guardian assigned to the kid. So it's not necessarily the biological parent. It could be an older sibling. It could be a grandparent. It could be an aunt. It could be somebody in CPS. It could be the foster care system. So whoever the caregiver is for this kiddo, that's who I serve.
Yeah, I love that. We've been trying to be intentional about using that phrasing, because so often it's not the immediate bio parent necessarily, but sometimes it is. But yeah, no, I love that. And so let's start off. There's some questions in here. You guys feel free to throw in some questions. Yeah, because we want to know what you want to know, but I may throw out some to Courtney and Paula. But I think that's good. What does a work week look like for advocates? Court, you could answer this probably. What does a week in the life of an advocate look like?
It just depends. I think most of the people on our team can agree that no one day looks the same, and that's kind of the reason what, among other things, that's what keeps us here, because we just never know what to expect. It is it really just depends. It's based off of the need of the client, and so we have a range from like kind of basic to intense, and depending on where that youth lands on that spectrum is going to kind of dictate what your day looks like. And so what the day could look like is starting out in a training and thinking that it's going to be a slow coasting day, and a youth calls and says that, you know, they're in need of transportation to get here, to get medical taken care of. And so it looks like you maybe stopping that training, going to go pick up that youth, getting her or him into medical treatment, and then whatever it is that they're needing for the day. Or it could look like, you know, you already having your visit scheduled out for the day. You getting there thinking that, you know, we're going to talk about goals and we're going to safety plan some things and talk about future stuff. And we get there and it's a whole nother situation, and that goes out the window. And whatever it is that they're needing to get taken care of, or whatever crisis that is, we're kind of dropping everything that we're needing to do to get them taken care of. And so a lot of times it looks like going to court. That's the advocacy just looks different, right? Advocacy is just based off of, again, just the need that client has. But it can look like totally different ways. It can look like Paula's role of showing up in the caregiver role and supporting in that way. It can look like going to court. It can look like getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go getting IDs taken care of, standing in that DMV line, both pre and post COVID. It can look like whatever it is that client needs that day to look like. I think that's probably the most simplified way I can bring it down to. But no day looks the same, which is kind of what makes my heart beat fast about this role. But yeah, it can look like whatever.
I love that. And what about you, Paula? What does a day or week look like in the life of someone whose caseload is a group of caregivers?
It can look like a variety of things. One thing I do is court advocacy. So whenever a caregiver has to go to court along with their kiddo, I'm usually there to support the caregiver. And you don't realize how important it is until you're there with them, for them to have a professional there with them, to just sit with them and help them to calm down or deep breathe, or, you know, practice what they want to say, and, you know, just help them understand that it's not the end of the world. Also, preparing for groups. One thing I loved about groups that people don't realize is our organization is so great. They're so phenomenal. And because we were not able to meet in one place, when we would do it virtually, I would have the opportunity from the organization and great donors to send each caregiver a meal for the evening. That way they wouldn't have to worry about food for the family. And they were so grateful about that. It could range from them having crises with the kid and, talking through that, or setting up meetings where myself and an advocate, along with the caregiver and the kiddo, we all meet together to try to get an understanding of what that home environment looks like, get an understanding of where the breakdown in communication is coming, try to get both of them on the same page and support. The advocate supports the kid, I support the caregiver. It could also look like, hey, we don't have food. We need food. We're having some challenges. So it can look like making sure they get groceries, making sure their bills are paid, referring them to outside sources, and just continuing to have those regular meetings that are scheduled. Yeah.
I love that. And I think that, something that people probably don't necessarily think of when they think of like services to child sex trafficking victims is the family and the unique set of sometimes just swirly things that go on with families, and how most of the time, I mean, I think the average age of a kid that comes into our program is 15. So they're not necessarily living out on their own. They're going to be living with someone, a caregiver or a family member. And so, yeah, it's one of the things that comes to my mind are some of the challenges. Maybe you can speak to this, Courtney, on behalf of like the advocate side, like challenges with helping and coaching families get along. Like, you know what I mean? Like when there's disputes or things like that, like what is that like as an advocate to sort of help coach, intervene in when guardians and kiddos aren't getting along?
That's a good question. So we often kind of get put in a lot of situations where parents can sometimes think we're mediators or co-parents sometimes when it comes to some of the things that our clients kind of go through. I think the core of most of this is generational trauma a lot of times, and just the lack of understanding around trauma in general. But there's so many things that aren't talked about in families that get passed on from generation to generation, to the point where it gets normalized. So abuse gets normalized, trafficking gets normalized. We now have language around these things, but the reality is this stuff has been going on for ages, right? We just didn't have an actual term for it, and because we don't have like terms for it, we haven't had the tools to be able to address those things. And so what we end up seeing is feuds between family members and their youth when they start to engage in services or interact with us, because they don't have an understanding of what's actually going on. And the tendency is to, call it attention seeking, or the behavior is attention seeking. There's a tendency to, when you just don't know, you just don't know. And I think like that's the tension, because then the youth, for the first time, when they were able to use their voice to say what happened to them, and they were believed and got the services that they need. Imagine like going back home and your mom or dad don't like they have a hard time like grappling what's going on, or they're kind of against the grain with you. And so a lot of it, I think the core issue is like just lack of understanding around it, generational curses and traumas that kind of get passed down, and just not having the tools to do it, which I'm so grateful that's why Paula's role is so key, because what she gets to do is like hold space to teach parents those things, and to normalize that, no, actually, mom, what you went through was also trafficking. We just didn't call it trafficking back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I can, if I can, just kind of speak from a cultural standpoint for just a second, that I think a lot of times in the Black community, the pimping culture is a big thing. And I think a lot of times what ends up happening is it gets normalized through our media, through our conversations, and what is actually trafficking, and gets called something else. And so it always kind of goes under the radar sometimes and never gets kind of brought up to the surface, because again, this is what, this is what we do. We like to say here at Trafficking 911 and like in this space in general, that you can't really start talking about sex trafficking, human trafficking, any type of trafficking until you start talking about more systemic things that, you know, put people in situations that have to do these things to begin with. And so
Yeah.
That's a whole nother, if we had time, we would go into that. We don't have time to go into that, but that's a whole nother conversation. But I do think it kind of goes hand in hand with some of the feuds that we see. But then you add that, couple that with just the life stage of a teenager in general, just a teenager that's just teening, you know, like they just think everything is about their teening. Teening. You add that on top of trauma, then you got a whole nother thing. And so, yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I want to jump to you, Paula, but before, if anyone just joined us, feel free to pop questions in the question area or in the chat. Either way, we're just like chatting away, but we'd love to hear what you want to know. And I'll ask you the same thing, kind of, Paula, like when there's conflict in the home, where we see a lot of that once kids get recovered and get back in the home, like what is that like from your vantage point? And then I see Decretia, you asked a question. I want to get to yours next. So yeah, Paula, what's that like?
Well, what it's like is the parent doesn't realize that they've gone through trauma with the child not being there. So many times we focus on the child and their trauma that they experienced being out, but the parent also goes through the trauma with kiddo not being there, and then with kiddo coming back home and expecting everything to be the same. And that's where the biggest gap is, where hasn't been enough education and understanding to equip the parents with, hey, things are going to look different for you. This kid has been through a whole lot while they were gone. Trying to eliminate some language especially with cultural barriers. One of the things I know that has been said a lot in the African-American community is the kiddo was being fast. And so trying to eliminate some of that language, also just allowing the caregiver to talk and be heard. Because the other challenge they have is, my child has this advocate, this kid is being empowered to speak, but nobody's here for me. So empowering them, letting them know that someone is there for them, as well as the youth, but trying to bridge that gap in communication and understanding for everybody to understand that everybody's experienced trauma while the kiddo was gone. And so trying to, I guess, reintegrate the kid into the space and allowing room for mistakes, allowing room for growing pains, allowing room for relapses, because that's going to happen too. It doesn't always just get perfect overnight. And especially when you consider how long these cycles have been going on, especially when you consider how the parents were parented, which is something Courtney was speaking into. So when you consider all those things, you learn to celebrate small victories. You learn to celebrate small victories in the moment, because a lot of times we don't see these big changes that lets us know that something we're doing is being effective. But when you can see those small changes, when a parent says, hey, I remember something we discussed in the group, I didn't know that, but when it happened, I was able to do this. And one thing Courtney pointed out, which is something we addressed during group, is trying to distinguish what's teenage behavior versus what is defiant, disruptive behavior, and educating them on some things are just teenage behavior. It just regardless of what's going on, a teen is going to teen, like Courtney said. Just trying to help those parents understand that, because realizing, unfortunately, that you have a lot of parents who were teens when they had these kids.
Yeah.
So they were growing up as they were trying to raise children, and it's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is a lot. I would think that this might be a side that people don't think about quite as often, you know, like when we say, well, when we talk about what we do. But I'll change the tune a little bit and answer DeQuisha's question. What do you do if you suspect someone is a victim of trafficking? Do you call the police? I'll answer this. Yes, call the police. Here especially in DFW, I don't know where you're at, but I would say in Texas and any kind of the bigger cities, police, it usually gets the right person. I can't say they're going to handle it like perfectly every time, but the way we get connected with the youth we serve is from police. And because it is a criminal matter, it really should be, I think you call 911, or if you just don't feel like it's like urgent, and maybe there's something that you saw next door or something like that, then you can call the non-crisis hotline or the non-crisis line. But the other option is, and if someone from our team wants to put it in the chat, there is a National Human Trafficking Hotline that has both a text line and a regular line. They're kind of like the national clearinghouse for tips and things, and they speak directly to local law enforcement. So you can always call the human trafficking hotline as well, and just like share with them what you're seeing, and they can kind of direct you to the next step. They may say, hey, you should hang up and call 911, or they may say, we'll take down this tip and we'll send it into law enforcement. We have a crisis line. It's mostly for the clients we serve and our partners to get to call us with referrals. But if you just have an issue and you don't feel like anyone's addressing it, I mean, give us a call too. We're happy to help you kind of navigate it. But I think the biggest thing is, I think a lot of people see things and don't say anything. And there's like a campaign out there right now that's like, if you see something, say something, but I think it's worth it. I'm like, I'd rather be safe and report something that you see than it not get reported. And I think sometimes a lot of that is like massage parlors in the area. I mean, it goes to all of those different things that you see. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question, but feel free to if it doesn't. Do you guys have anything else to add to that?
That's a good question. A real good question.
Yeah. So let's talk about this. This is a good question. Where does advocacy begin and end? I can hear Cheryl's voice on this answer, but what do you think, Courtney?
I think this is probably was probably one of my biggest struggles as an advocate, because so just to kind of leave with what Cheryl likes to say, of just like, and we took it from a song, but just like asking the Lord to help us to be able to fight but still sleep, because we be fighting for these youth, and sometimes we forget to rest, we forget where it is. I think if I can just be sorry, my dog is going cuckoo bananas in the background, but
I can't hear it.
Okay. Yeah, if I can be honest, this is something I struggle with the most, because one is a spiritual warfare thing, and they're like, that's a whole thing by itself, and then you're up against systems, then you're up against generational things, and so but then like at the very, very minimum of like, you're just up against like trying to make sure that other people see your client with the inherent dignity and worth that they have for themselves. So I think that was my biggest struggle, because not everybody views everybody the same way. And I think, yeah, it's just hard, because you got to kind of pick and choose your battles on what is my fight and what is like not my fight, and how do I still show up for my client without losing my job, without misrepresenting, who I serve, all the things. There's a lot of different things that I used to constantly have to think about, but advocacy, I think it goes back to what I said earlier about because advocacy can look so different based off of where the client is. I think it starts where that client is, and it ends where where they want it to end. I think like just kind of walking alongside them and making it tailored towards them. If I could take myself out of it and what I want from my client, what I think that she needs, I probably will be able to show up more effectively for her and serving her if I take myself out of it. Because the moment that I make it about me or what I think she should be doing, that's where I start fighting without sleeping. That's where I go against all of these these things that are beyond what I can even control. And then I get discouraged and burn out and all of those things. And so, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I think of, I don't remember exactly how Cheryl says it, but it's something like I'm only going to fight as hard as you fight. Like I can't fight harder for you than you're fighting for yourself. And that goes to boundaries, which is actually another question. I'm curious, Paula, what you think, like, yeah, how does that work? I think, and I'll say the struggle, like Courtney's saying, is it's hard. It's hard serving people with so many obstacles stacked up against them. And sometimes feeling like if we don't fight for them in this, no one else will, and so it kind of, it can breed this savior complex, martyr, like I've got to, go till I'm raggedy, because if I don't fight for her, no one will. And I'll just be really real. One of the clients I used to serve committed suicide last week, and we've had a lot of deaths in the last few years. And so there's this constant, like, oh, like if we don't fight as hard as we can, she's going to end up dead, or things like that. And so we've got to really check ourselves and have some real strong boundaries in where does our work begin and their work, or where does our work end and their work begin, or vice versa. Just knowing how to have boundaries. But yeah, what would you say about that, Paula?
I would say, kind of piggyback on something Courtney said, is understanding where you end, understanding where you're doing more work than they are doing. That's that boundary piece, when you're extending yourself way more than they are, when you're inserting your feelings, your thoughts, and as much injustice as there is, we have to understand that, hey, this is not the only person I'm serving. I'm serving these people. I am committed to helping these people, but I can only help them so far. So being able to check in with yourself and, asking yourself, hey, am I okay? Did I do this correctly? Did I put too much? Did I not do enough? Am I burnt out? Am I just going on flames? Because you can only serve to the best of your ability when you've had adequate rest, when you've rested your mind, when you've eaten. When you can only serve them to the best of your ability. And it's so important to show up as your authentic self when you are helping these clients. When you realize that you are not yourself, that's when, that boundary has to be, well, that's not when, but it should have been put in place. But you have to be aware. And you also have to take the responsibility off yourself. It is not my job to keep them alive. And it sounds like a harsh statement, but when you deal with these situations, when you deal with, people, because we do hear a lot of clients say, hey, I don't want to live. You have parents saying those things. So understanding that I'm not responsible for that. I'm only responsible for doing the best I can while I'm serving them. Mm-hmm. And I learned that through one of our therapists, when we had a group setting with the advocates. And that was one thing she shared with us that has stuck with me, that has kind of allowed me to relinquish control of situations. Because like you said, this is a helping profession. And if we're not careful, we want to put on capes and save everybody. So understanding that it's not our job to save, it's our job to help and point them to the one who can.
Yeah.
That's real. Can I add one more thing to that too? I was just kind of thinking, like we talk a lot about like empowerment. One of the things that I came to realize is that our clients are constantly watching us when we talk about like the empowerment thing, when we talk about putting the ball back in their court to take care of their business. We're modeling that during our visits and our interactions with them. And so I think one of the things that kind of helped me like remember these things is just like I can't talk about empowerment, but do everything for them. Because then at that point I'll be enabling them. And so I think that just kind of going back to what Paula was saying, if empowerment is really what we're after, and teaching them life skills and equipping them for, things to come for them, us doing everything for them or burning ourselves out in the process, they see those things as well. And so it's kind of contradicting to what we're trying to do to begin with.
Yeah, it's not forward progress. I mean, if we're enabling versus empowering, there's really not forward progress in them being their own, and we're really not showing them dignity. Like, hey,
Mhm.
you are brave, you are smart, you are so capable of doing blank, 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 you know, and if I do it for you, to me, I'm nullifying the fact that you have your own smarts and dignity and brilliance to be
Mhm.
accessed of your in and of yourself, you know. And I think that if we're doing our job really well, we working ourselves out of a job with the clients that we serve, because
Yeah.
empowerment means they can be um independent and interdependent healthily in community, and
Mhm.
able to access things on their own, and able to handle conflict better, and able to work through some of their mental health. Like, we should be working ourselves out, you know, of their lives, hopefully, and then just can be friends, if
Mhm.
possible, forever. But that's how I feel, at least. But
Yeah.
I know that's
We
not
know.
that's not real, but I want to be
We
friends
know.
with everyone for forever. So on that kind of harder topic, I'm curious, one of the questions is, what, I think all three of us should answer this. What are some of the most challenging parts about your job? What are top challenges, top frustrations of doing this work? Court or Paula, whoever
Uh,
wants to go first.
Paul, you got your answer?
I
You
think I
still
have
kind of
my
chewing on it. Okay.
one of the hardest parts for me is when a kid runs away and the caregiver, I'm sorry, is doing everything in their power to advocate for the kid. And it seems like nothing is happening. One of the most frustrating things is kids not receiving the services they need, which impacts the family unit. So I would say that the challenging thing for me are the other systems that affect the lives of these kids and caregivers. I would say the other systems. That's the most challenging thing, because that's when I really feel helpless.
Yeah.
Because there's something that I can't help you, I can't empower you to fight against, because certain systems are just set up in a certain way to where they feel impenetrable.
Hmm.
That's what it feels like. So it feels like the burden, and the other challenge is the mental health issues within the community. So and within these victims and some caregivers, because again, it goes back to what goes on in this house stays in this house. It goes back to, oh, nothing's wrong with her. It's just, she's just trying to get her way or trying to do certain things. But the lack of understanding the mental health issues and just having access to certain things. So I would say systems that affect these families. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's real. What do you think, Court?
Systems. Yeah. Systems are, I mean, I probably, yeah. Systems and I said this before, but just whenever, just getting people to see um, this particular population with the actual inherent indignity that and work that they have. I think I struggle with that the most. Most of my conversations and frustrations are not with my clients; it's with people who make comments about the work, the with just the population in general, because of just the lack of understanding. But I think that we are in a very unique spot where we get to have some really healthy conversations in a way that isn't, combative or argumentative, but we get a chance to, we get the opportunity to teach on things based off our interactions with our clients. And so that's a really unique spot, but systems, hands down, systems is probably, I have wrestled with the Lord on many things about systems in general. And just within the systems, again, people who just don't see the issue for what it is, or some people who will justify the issue. There's just a lot of different things that go on just within systems. But yeah, to what Paula was saying, just the fact that, yeah, like there's things that aside from the system, you just see the stack up of just like one system that doesn't work. And so how that, because that one system may or may not work, it push you into another system and then makes you more vulnerable to another system, which now, you know, it's almost like kind of serving on a silver platter of just all of these different systems that led you to be vulnerable. But just the, yeah, just the lack of understanding that goes around that. But I do think like things like this and just like a lot of the survivor leaders that are already doing things to have conversations, I think is pivotal to make sure that community awareness and stuff. But yeah, systems.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that's real. Go ahead, Paul.
I have one more. The other, I would say the hardest part is when kiddo has to go to court to face their trafficker, and then the trafficker is not convicted.
Mm.
So dealing with the caregivers after that, that's difficult.
Oh,
Very-
yeah. Yeah, some of my most traumatizing moments, or I'll say in my top 10 are when I've had to sit with a girl or in court with a girl where her trafficker was on trial and the defense attorney was cross-examining her. She was 16 in juvenile detention, you know, all the things. And that's amongst the most horrifying things for someone to have to sit through that. Thankfully, her trafficker did get sentenced pretty well, but I think he got 25 or 35 years. But still, the damage it caused her to sit on the stand while a defense attorney got to like just peel her dignity away, it was something I'll never forget and something no one should ever have to go through. And so there's a lot that needs to be done for systems, and there's a lot being done down in Austin and DC to kind of further just better our laws so that that kind of stuff doesn't happen, but we're still a long way. I would say one of the most challenging things for me is something, I think one of you guys, I think maybe Court hit on it, but just people viewing them as people with dignity. Like our society views these kids. Even last week we were down in Austin and we were sitting, I won't say in whose office, but in a person of power's office down in Austin, talking about some laws that we want to get passed, including that kids as young as 13 shouldn't be charged with prostitution. And this person who we were talking to kind of was just essentially he was was talking about just how, like, what if they don't want help, and what if kind of almost this element of like choice, like what if they're choosing this, and you know, it's like this is the perspective people have that fights against everything we're trying to fight for with the clients that we serve, is that they are choosing this life, that they want this, or, you know, if they really want help, they'd reach out. Just that whole like perspective that people have with kids and adults even who have been trafficked. That's probably some of the most challenging things, I feel like, is that it takes a lot to change a whole cultural perspective on who these people are and what's happening for real. But now I feel like we have to like talk about the hopeful part, because we just like said the system sucks, here we are, you know. But I'm curious what you guys think. What's the most, like, what keeps you going? Whoever wants to answer.
The clients keep me going. I think there's just something incredibly resilient about being able to face one of the hardest things in your life, and then letting some little scrawny woman come into your life and just like want to walk alongside and like, I don't know. We always talk about this like during our interview process. I try to make it a point to make sure that people understand that it's not like we don't get asked to be here by our clients. Usually it's not a very inviting experience during a crisis response. It's not like, oh, hey girl, I've been waiting on you all night. Like it's usually, like that I don't care who you are, and so I think to experience one of the hardest things in your life and then still be open and then eventually trust me and trust any type of tools or skills or conversations, anything that I can say, just to even let me in your space after somebody has invaded your space. It's just like, that's what keeps me going, because they're their own advocates, truly, honestly. Like, they're their own advocates. They just don't realize it yet. We get a chance to kind of pull that out of them. And then when they realize it, it's a wrap. It's a wrap. That's when it becomes, like, you don't even need me. You don't even need any of this. Not that you ever needed me to begin with, but like, I don't even need to be here, because you figured it out. You unlock the code, and we're gonna get this fine. But like, they're their own advocates, and I think that's what that's what I love the most about it, and that's what kind of keeps me going.
Mm-hmm. That's what we're trying to pull out of them.
Pulling it out.
Paula.
Let's see, what keeps me going? I would say when caregivers, when they show that they've been empowered and they begin to advocate for the needs of the kids. What else? The other thing that keeps me going is when they say, I need to go to counseling, because then you understand that there's an opportunity for more healing to take place. And so when they realize I need help, and I may not be used to receiving help, but I'm finally in a place to be open to receive the help. I love that. And just being able to see sometimes those relationships improve. Like I said, celebrating those small victories, celebrating them actually hearing what their kid is saying, and also being willing to be open to do something different. So I would say definitely those are a few things that keep me going.
Yeah.
I have one more thing I want to add, if I can.
Yeah.
Just getting to see like our youth like play, whether it's for the first time in their lives or like again, because we know just this lifestyle strips so many things away, childhood specifically. And so everybody's childhood is subjective, and the experiences that we have, but we get a chance to kind of bring some of those things back, and just like things that you wouldn't think a teenager would actually enjoy, that they end up enjoying, is everything to me. Just hearing them laugh. I can think of one of my more trying to figure out the word to use. She's just real tough in terms of just exterior, got a real tough exterior, and hearing her laugh for the first time going bowling. For the record, I did beat her. I gave her an opportunity, but beat her ultimately. But just to hear her laugh throughout, just something that she thinks everything is lame in the world, but like we went bowling, and it was just like the best thing in the world for her. And so I think just hearing clients laugh and play, because we know play is a child's love language, and so if we get to give that back to them, and we get to hold space for them and just do that. And so yeah,
I love that. Yeah, a lot of things keep me going. I don't know, I think that seeing the wins keeps me going, even like just the small wins, like kind of like Paula was saying. But I also just think I don't know, even the client deaths we've had keeps me going, because I want to know that we've done everything we can to potentially better the system and pour in people's lives. I don't know. Yeah. It's, and also just like to get to see the resiliency is pretty cool. It's a huge honor to get to see them overcome things. And like you said, I think Courtney, just seeing them trust again after trust has just been like broken in their lives.
Mhm.
To see them like open up and be willing to trust us is it's one of the coolest things ever. But let's see, what else do we want to answer? Well, let's answer this one. Court, I know you have a client or advocate with a client who is a boy. So what does advocating for boys look like with a staff of all women?
That's been a learning curve, just to acknowledge that, and be honest with that. But I think the fun part has been, the particular advocate is her getting to see that like they need support just like the girls need support. And I think that that's just been the basis. She starts there and then kind of tailors it towards what he needs. And I think that's been the coolest part of just coming to the realization. And it shouldn't have been just like this huge aha moment, but it's like, oh yeah, like okay, you just need support. Yeah, that's all you just need support. And so being able to kind of again tailor it to what he needs. He recently mentioned wanting to do counseling with someone who looks like him and preferred a male. And so we had an opportunity to kind of be a bridge builder with that and get them connected. But I think from what I've heard with the advocate is boys are just more just down to earth in general. And so I think it kind of helps us kind of go in with just like, okay, like I can actually just breathe and just kind of go at your own tempo because I think boys they just have this temperament about them. They're just super chill. They like to get their haircuts and just, hang out. It was a learning curve.
Not as needy.
Not as needy as girls, I will say that. And then celebrating like the small wins with them just looks like, just literally a haircut. That's all he wants to do is to get his haircut. And so, it's been really cool because there's a lot to be learned about boys in this space for sure. But I think like just coming to the realization that, that support is, that doesn't go away just because he's a boy. And so I think if we just try to start there and then kind of meet him where he is the same way we do with our girl clients. And so there is a lot to be learned about it though. And so over time, I know some more things have kind of come up, but that's been the gist of it.
Yeah, we have a handful of boys on our caseload, and we do have all women staff so far. I'm sure at some point we will add a male. Most of the male clients that we've served typically will want a female advocate. Most of the abuse that they've experienced statistically comes from a male. So that's been our experience. But like Courtney said, we still have so much to learn. And really the movement has so much to learn. There's some really great, Nathan Earl would be a name if you're interested in learning more. He is a survivor leader, kind of nationally known and doing a lot to bring awareness to the boys who are being trafficked. They're just not identified enough. So we don't get as much, we don't get as many referrals from boys. But I do anticipate, and we have seen a slow uptick for male clients, and I imagine we'll continue to see that. Anything to add on that, Paula?
No, not currently.
Okay, you're good. So how do you maintain boundaries, Paula, with their family side of it?
Well, for me, just communicating with caregivers when I'm available, when I'm not available. And if I'm not available, there's a crisis line. But just having those conversations early, I realized that people will respect the boundaries if you communicate to them. If you communicate it to them, it's more of, I'll get text messages outside of the hours that I say I'm available, and it'll start with, hey, I know you're not available right now, but when you see this, can you call me? So they do preface it, they do understand it, but they also know when I am available, I'm 100% there for you. But they also respect that, hey, you need rest as well. So, and because they are caregivers, and because I can kind of understand and empathize with them as having my own, adult daughters, but then also remembering what it was like to be a parent when they were teenagers, remembering all of everything that came along with it. So being able to share that with them, but then also letting them know in the kindest way that, hey, we all need to rest. You all need to rest as well. One of the most challenging things that tugs at my heart is those parents who have kids who are missing or on runaway status for several months at a time. And it's mind-blowing to listen to them tell you how they cope with it, things that they did to get through each day. And so back to the boundaries piece, just being able to communicate it to them and also respecting their boundaries as well, because they are parents, they have their own boundaries, or they try to create their own boundaries. So I think it's a mutual exchange of respect, a mutual commitment to communicating those things to each other.
Yeah. No, I love that. It's hard. It's a dance.
Mm-hmm.
The dance. You get better and better at it though. Someone asked a question about law enforcement court. Would you explain kind of what it looks like for advocacy and law enforcement systems, how we work together maybe?
Yeah, so we wouldn't be able to do what we do without them. They're a great partner of ours. We collaborate with just meeting them. What would you want me to go through, like the crisis response, or just like our general? Okay. So they play a pivotal role in our crisis response. They're the reasons usually why crisis response begins. And so a crisis response would be if a youth, when a youth is found in a high risk area, and gives reason to believe that where trafficking is happening, they would initiate a crisis response, reach out to us. We get a chance to go down there and advocate, and we just kind of work with them alongside throughout the immediate response that night. And then long-term case management, while we work with the advocate, or while we work with the client, law enforcement is working on their case and the investigative piece. And so we're constantly collaborating. Our role in it is to just relationship, right? Just to make sure that relationship is maintained in tandem, kind of receiving updates, giving updates, anything that would be helpful towards getting justice for this youth. And then we just get a chance to, justice is like the ultimate goal, and how they all kind of bring that together. But yeah, they are one of our most key partners, because like I said, we wouldn't be able to do what we do without them. They're the boots on the ground, and kind of going after all the bad guys with all the things. And it's been cool to collaborate with them, because you get to see the humanity in them. I can be very transparent and say that prior to this role, I had like different views when it came to law enforcement as they related to our youth. Very protective of that. But through like partnership, I've been able to see more humanity in our law enforcement partners, which has been very redeeming for me, because the law enforcement side is one of the things that make my heart beat fast. And so it's been really cool to kind of see just humans. They're humans as well, in learning their roles, because I think a lot of times, going back to the question about where does advocacy start and where it ends, a lot of times my frustrations with systems, and more specifically law enforcement, would be a lack of understanding of what they're actually able to control and what they can't control. And so during our partnership, or throughout collaboration with them, I've been able to kind of get a closer view into like, oh, that makes sense why, maybe this isn't moving fast enough, or whatever the case is. It's giving us an insider on, no, they're doing a thing, it just looks different. So advocacy looks different for them too. But yeah, I love our law enforcement partners.
Yeah. Basically, the majority of our referrals all come from the kids we serve, come from law enforcement. So we're grateful for them here, especially in the North Texas area. So, okay, before we wrap up, I guess I'll ask both of you, what do you wish people knew, like about maybe even like about like what you do or about what we do here? Like, what do you wish people knew that it doesn't seem like they do?
I would start with, I wish people knew that trafficking does not necessarily start with kidnapping, but it's usually someone in close proximity to the kid. Whether it's a neighbor, whether it's a family member, they're not that far removed from their trafficker. That's what I wish people knew.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. Dispelling a myth.
I think I wish people knew that no one wakes up and chooses to be trafficked. No one wakes up and chooses to have vulnerabilities that would lead them to be trafficked. And no one's families want to be in positions where, that will make them vulnerable. I think a big frustration of mine is the language that's used around this particular population, both youth and adults. I think I would just tell people that, you know, nobody chooses to be trafficked and exploited. And so I think if we can have more conversations around just that starting point, then we may start to see different things just in this movement. But that would be my takeaway.
Yeah, that's good. I think I would say what I wish people knew was how brilliant and resilient they are. How they don't deserve to be. Yeah, that's exactly what Cheryl just said. This part of their story is just a part of their story and they shouldn't be labeled. I know a lot of survivors that don't want to be called a survivor. I mean, they're all survivors, but who wants to be, how would you like the rest of your life to be labeled by the worst trauma that's ever happened to you? There's so much more than what's happened to them. And I want the whole world to know that, that they are, they're entrepreneurial, they're creative. They have a whole life in front of them. And so I hope we as a community get to cheerlead on that more than just the like, whoa, you were trafficked, you know, but just see them as humans who are really resilient and courageous to come back and trust anyone in humanity after what's happened to them. It's so cool. Okay, well, we are at our mark of ending. That went by really fast. I could do this all day. Well, thanks you guys for joining. You can email hello@traffic911.com if you have other questions or reach out to us on social. But thank you, Courtney and Paula, for joining us. And we'll see y'all later.
All right.
See y'all later. Thank you.
Bye.